He set one sheet of paper on the kitchen table and turned it to face me, slow and careful. The way you turn a check toward someone you are certain will sign it. It is already done. Nora, he said, you just have to acknowledge it. 4 years and 3 months I had lived in our mother's house and cared for her body and her mind as both of them came apart in my hands. I had never once taken $1 for it. The page he slid across the table said otherwise. It said, my brother had paid me $102,000. It carried my signature at the bottom, looped and confident and final, and I had never in my life signed it. I picked it up. I read the notary stamp first, before anything else. Because reading notary stamps is what I do now. Today, I examine property records. For a living, I find the people who steal houses with a pen, and one page at a time. I take the houses back. So when my brother handed me a forgery across our dead mother's kitchen table, he did not know he was handing it to the one person in the family, trained to take it apart. My name is Nora Brandt. I am 38 years old. Welcome back to The Quiet Ones, the channel where the person nobody bothered to listen to turns out to be the one holding the only honest record in the room, and where the quiet ones always outlast the loud. If you have ever been the one who stayed, the one who did the caring while everyone else did the talking, you already know how this story sits in your chest before I even tell it. Stay with me and subscribe if this is your kind of story. Because I am going to tell you how a man who spent 4 years telling me you don't get paid to love. Your own mother ended up forging a receipt that said he had paid me, and I am going to tell you how that one contradiction cost him every single thing he thought he had taken. Let me take you back to the Tuesday. It started for real, not the funeral, not the kitchen table. 3 weeks after both of those, on an ordinary Tuesday, when my phone lit up on the arm of my couch, with a message from a number I almost didn't recognize. It was my niece, Emma, 16 years old, Dale's daughter, a kid who mostly communicated in one-word answers and shrugs. There was no text under the file she sent, just a video, sitting there in the message thread. The small gray triangle of a play button waiting for me to make a decision I could not yet understand the size of. I almost left it. It was 9:40 p.m., and I had a closing file open on my laptop and a cup of tea going cold beside me. But it was Emma. So I tapped it. The video was shot low and sideways, the way a kid films something they are not supposed to be filming. The phone held down against a thigh under a table. It was my mother's repast, the lunch after her funeral, the one I had organized, the deviled eggs I had made at 5 that morning, the rented chairs I had paid for and returned, and there in the frame was my brother Dale, standing, glass raised, doing the thing he has done at every family gathering for 30 years. Making a toast out of nothing, because a toast is the only time a room goes quiet for him. Here is to Nora, he said, and the table was already smiling before he got the next part out. 40 years old, I am 38, but accuracy was never the point. 40 years old, no husband, no kids, no career, living in her mommy's spare room, and now she wants a medal for it. The laugh that went around that table is a sound I will be undoing for the rest of my life. My sister Janelle's quick, agreeable giggle, and Uncle's low rumble, and my brother, riding it, going in for the line he clearly thought was the good one. You don't get paid to love your own mother. Nora, some people just figure that out a little late. Then Emma's camera tilted up for half a second and caught her own face in the reflection of a dark window. And the look on that kid's face is the only reason I am telling you any of this. She was not laughing. She looked like she wanted to be anywhere else on Earth. The clip ended there. Then finally, a text from her came through. 3 words, and nothing else. I am sorry. Aunt Nora, I want you to understand something about that moment. Because it is the hinge. The whole story turns on. I did not cry. I did not text the family group. I did not call Dale. I sat very still on my couch with my cold tea. And I felt the strangest thing settle over me. Not heartbreak. Clarity. Because a man does not stand up and tell a room you don't get paid to love your own mother unless he is already nervous that somebody, somewhere, is going to ask him for a number. Stay with me, because that instinct is the whole case. But first you need to know how I got into that house, and what I carried out of it. I keep records. That is the simplest way to say what I am. Before my mother got sick, I worked 9 years as a title clerk, and then a title examiner at Meridian Title, a small underwriter that handles property closings for half the county. My job every day is to read the history of a piece of land written in documents and make sure nothing in that history is a lie. Deeds, mortgages, liens, easements, releases. I read signatures the way other people read faces. I can tell you when a signature was made by a steady hand and when it was made by a careful one. And those are not the same thing. People think the loud jobs are the powerful ones. I have learned it is the quiet ones, the ones holding the paper, who decide what is real. When my mother, Lorraine, was diagnosed at 61 with a dementia that moved fast, the family had a meeting about it. I use the word meeting loosely. Dale ran a contracting business and was, in his own telling, far too busy. Janelle had her own kids and her own marriage, and a long list of reasons. My mother had a house, the house on Sycamore Street where the 3 of us grew up, paid off and worth something. And she had a horror of strangers in it. And she had me, 33 years old at the time, unmarried, no children. Which in my family translated, without anyone ever saying it out loud, to no real life, and therefore nothing to interrupt. So I gave my notice at Meridian Title. I told them I hoped to come back, and I moved into my childhood bedroom to take care of my mother, as she forgot how to be in the world. If you have never done it, I am not going to be able to make you feel the weight of it in one sentence. So, I will not try. I will just tell you what it was. It was 4 years and 3 months. It was waking at 2 a.m. and again at 4. Because she wandered. It was learning to bathe a grown woman who had bathed me. It was driving her to 19 separate doctors and reintroducing myself to her on the bad mornings. Hi, Mom. It is Nora. I am your daughter. And watching her search my face for a name that had slipped under the water. It was a job that did not stop, did not pay, and did not end until the person you were doing it for did. And from the very first week, I wrote it all down. I want to tell you about the notebook because it matters more than I knew at the time. It was a plain spiral notebook, the kind you buy 3 of for $1 at the drugstore, with a green cover that faded to the color of pond water by the end. I started it because the doctors needed it. Which medication, what dose, what time, how she responded, when she fell, when she slept, what she ate, which days she knew me, and which days she did not. 8 a.m. The morning pills. 2:30 p.m. The afternoon dose. Every entry dated. Every entry in my own handwriting. The same hand every day. For more than 1,500 days, Dale saw that notebook exactly once. When he came by to drop off nothing and stay 20 minutes, he picked it up off the counter, flipped it, and set it down with a little laugh. "What is this?" "Your diary," he said. "You writing down how hard your life is." My sister, who was there that day, smiled at her phone. I took the notebook back and said it was for the doctors. He had already lost interest. "Whatever keeps you busy," he said. "That is the phrase I want you to hold on to. Whatever keeps you busy." He thought he was looking at a sad woman's way to fill her empty days. He was looking at a 4-year, time-stamped, contemporaneous record, written in a steady professional hand that would one day end him. He just could not read it. Reading was never his job. There was one more thing about Dale in those years that I filed away and did not understand the shape of until much later. About 18 months in, the bills for my mother's care started arriving at the house with a stamp on them I did not recognize. Second notice. Then final notice. Her long-term care insurance had stopped paying. When I called the company, a tired woman on the line told me the premium had not been paid in 4 months, and the policy had lapsed. The premium was drafted automatically from my mother's main account, the account Dale managed, because 2 years earlier he had quietly had himself made power of attorney over the money, so Mom wouldn't have to deal with the bank. And nobody had argued, because arguing with Dale about money is like arguing with a wall about the weather. I asked him about it, carefully, the way you ask a man like Dale anything. He told me he had moved some things around to consolidate, that it was handled, that I should stick to the medicine and let him handle the dollars. He restored the policy, but I had seen, for one cold second, the bottom of my mother's account on a statement he left on the counter. And it was thousands of dollars lower than it should have been. And there was a transfer line on it, with his name on the other end. I did not say anything. I wrote the date in the green notebook, the way I wrote everything, because that is what I do with a number that does not add up. I did not know yet that I was keeping the first page of a case. I just knew that the man who told a room I was a freeloader had, 18 months before that toast, already been moving our mother's money toward himself. One quiet transfer at a time. Remember that. The forgery at the end was not his first idea. It was his last one. The one person who understood what that notebook was the night nurse, about a year in, when my mother's nights got dangerous. Hospice sent a nurse 3 evenings a week, so I could sleep 4 hours straight. Her name was Beatrice Okafor. She was older than me, calm in a way that filled a room without taking it over. And she had buried more people than anyone I have ever met, and somehow came out of it gentler. She would see me writing in the notebook at midnight after a hard stretch, and she never once called it a diary. One night near the end, my mother had been crying for her own mother, dead 40 years, and I had finally gotten her settled, and I was at the kitchen table, writing it down with a hand that would not stop shaking. Beatrice sat across from me with her tea, and she watched me for a while. Then she said, the thing I have repeated to myself 1,000 times since. Baby, you keep writing it down. The ones who do the laughing never remember any of this, right? But the ones who do the writing, she tapped the table once, gently. We are the only ones who can tell them later exactly how it went. One day, the truest thing left in this whole house is going to be the thing in your hand. I did not know yet how literally she meant it. Neither did she. But I never forgot it. Beatrice listened to me for 3 years and never once tried to fix me, which is its own kind of fixing. She just made sure the record stayed true. Here is the part where I have to tell you about the promise and the key, because the family would later pretend neither one existed. There was a window in the second year, before the disease took the last of her, when my mother was still herself for hours. At a stretch, on one of those good afternoons, she did two things. The first, she took me to see an attorney named Mr. Adler, a careful older man with an office above the hardware store on Main Street, and she signed a will, a real one, witnessed by Mr. Adler and his paralegal, dated and notarized, leaving the house at 14 Sycamore Street to me, not split 3 ways. To me. She said it to Mr. Adler plainly, and I remember it word for word, because he wrote it into his notes. Nora is the one who stays. The house should go to the one who stays. Mr. Adler kept the original in his office safe. I took home a conformed copy, and, like a fool who trusted her family, I filed it in a drawer and did not think about it again for years. The second thing she did that afternoon was give me a key, the house key, on a loop of blue grosgrain ribbon. She had tied herself because her hands were not yet too unsteady for a bow. She pressed it into my palm and closed my fingers over it. So you can always get in, she said. You are the one who is here. At the time it was nothing, a spare key on a ribbon, an ordinary thing. I hung it on a hook by the door and used it every day for years, without seeing it. Remember, the key. It comes back. My mother died on a morning in early spring, at 4:40 a.m., with her hand in mine and Beatrice in the doorway. I had the notebook open on my knee, and the last entry in it, in my steady hand, is the time she stopped breathing. Then I closed it. I thought I was done writing in it forever. I was wrong about that, too. The funeral was fine. Grief makes everyone briefly decent. It was 3 weeks later, on the day I told you about at the top, that my brother slid a sheet of paper across the kitchen table and turned it to face me. I had come back to the house to start clearing it because somebody had to, and because the family had, by silent agreement, decided that somebody was me. Dale was already there when I arrived, which was unusual, sitting at the kitchen table with a folder. He had a way of arranging himself to look official. He told me he had been handling Mom's affairs, that he had been her power of attorney for the money the last 2 years, which was true, and that he had gotten the estate stuff taken care of, so I would not have to worry my head about it. Then he opened the folder. The first page he showed me was a deed, a quitclaim deed, he called it, transferring the house from our mother to him, recorded down at the county recorder's office, official, with the stamp and the book and page number, right there in the corner. Mom signed the house over to me last year, he said, so it wouldn't get tied up. It is cleaner this way. I'll handle selling it, and we'll split what is left after costs, fair and square. I did not say anything yet. I just looked at the date on that deed, and something cold and very familiar went through me. The same feeling I get at my desk when a file is hiding a number. Then he laid down the second page, the one that said, I had been paid, a personal care agreement. It was titled on a form I half recognized. It said that the Lorraine Brandt Family Trust, administered by Dale, had paid Nora Brandt $2,000 per month for in-home care for 51 months. At the bottom, a signature line with my name signed under it, and a notary stamp beside both. So, there is no confusion about you being compensated, he said, gentle as anything. You did good. Taking care of her, You got paid for it. So nobody owes anybody anything now. I just need you to acknowledge it, so we can close it all out. Clean. $2,000 a month. For 51 months. I did the multiplication standing right there in the kitchen. Because numbers are the language I think in. 2,000 times 51 is $102,000. He was telling me, with a straight face, 3 weeks after I had buried our mother, that I had been paid $102,000. I had never received $1. Not one. My bank account, which I balanced to the penny every month, had no record of a single deposit from any trust. Because no such deposit had ever been made, and he was right that you don't get paid to love your own mother. Because I never had been, he had told that exact truth to a laughing room 3 weeks earlier, and now he was sliding a forged receipt across the table that said the opposite. And he expected me to sign it. If you have ever been handed a lie about your own life in your own handwriting, by someone smiling at you, you know there is a specific silence that comes after. I sat in it. I'll look it over, is all I said. I did not sign. I told him I wanted to read it properly first. That I read documents for a living, and old habits die hard. Something flickered across his face when I said that. Just a flicker. I think it was the first moment it occurred to him, what I actually did all day. He covered it fast. Sure, he said, take it home. But the buyer's ready to go, so don't sit on it. I took the folder. I took my mother's green notebook off the counter, where it had lived for 4 years. And on my way out, I took the key on the blue ribbon off the hook by the door. Almost without thinking, the way you take something that is simply yours, I closed the door behind me. Soft. The latch settling into place the same quiet way it had 1,000 times. I want to be precise about that. Because of where this ends, I did not pull that door hard. I did not let it strike the frame. I just stopped, for the first time in years, holding it open for people who walked through it, and never once said thank you. I sat in my car in the driveway of the house I had lived in and cared for. And I cried exactly once. Hard, ugly, alone. With the windows up. For about 4 minutes. And then I was finished, and I drove home. And I have not cried since. I want you to remember that this is the only time it happens in this whole story. Because what comes next, I did with completely dry eyes. That night, I spread 3 pages on my own kitchen table, under a good lamp, the deed, the care agreement, and beside them, my mother's green notebook. And I did the thing I am good at, the thing they laughed at. I read, if you have ever been told that your job was a hobby, that your careful, quiet competence was just a way to keep yourself busy, then comment stayed below. Because I want to know how many of us there are, the ones who got underestimated by people who never bothered to learn what we actually do. Stay with me, because the next part is where what I do for a living met what they did to me, and the two of them did not get along. Let me start with the deed, because the deed is where Dale made his first real mistake. A quitclaim deed is a simple document. It transfers whatever interest one person has in a property to another, and it has to be signed by the person giving it up, the grantor. And that signature has to be acknowledged in front of a notary public, whose job is to swear that the person who signed it was really who they said they were, and signed it willingly, and was of sound mind. The notary is the safeguard. The notary is the whole point. And the notary block is the very first thing I read on any deed. Every day, before I read anything else. Because that is where the lies live. The deed, transferring my mother's house to Dale, was dated the 14th of November of the prior year. It bore my mother's signature. shaky and small, and it was notarized by a notary named Marvin Teller, whose stamp gave a commission number and an expiration date. I read that expiration date 3 times. Then, I sat back in my chair. Marvin Teller's notary commission had expired 8 months before the date on that deed. On the 14th of November, Marvin Teller had not been a notary public for 2/3 of a year, which means the acknowledgement on that deed was not just sloppy, it was void. A deed acknowledged by an expired notary is, in our county, voidable on its face. You do not need to prove fraud to challenge it. You just need to read the stamp. They had handed me a stolen house with a broken lock, and the broken lock was printed right there in the corner. But it got worse for Dale, and better for my mother, when I opened the notebook to the 14th of November, because I knew, the moment I read the date, that something was wrong, and I knew it because of the green notebook. My mother did not sign a deed. On the 14th of November, my mother could not have. On the 14th of November, in my own steady handwriting, dated and timed, the notebook reads that Lorraine was admitted to St. Vincent's at 11:20 a.m. with a fall and dehydration, that she was confused and did not know the year, and that she was kept overnight for observation. There is a second entry that evening. There is a discharge entry the next afternoon. My mother spent the 14th of November in a hospital bed, not knowing what season it was, while a deed across town swore she was sitting calmly in front of a notary, in sound mind, signing her house away. I called St. Vincent's the next week as a daughter requesting her late mother's records, which is my right. And they confirmed it in writing. Admission, the 14th. Discharge, the 15th. The hospital had her. The deed was a lie, wearing my mother's shaky hand. I did not say any of this to anyone yet. This is the part the loud people never understand about the quiet ones. We do not announce, we assemble. I had 2 pieces. I needed the rest. The care agreement was next, and it was almost insulting how poorly it was made. The way a thing is poorly made by someone who has never once had their paperwork checked by a professional. It claimed $2,000 a month, had flowed from the trust to me for 51 months. So I did what I do at work. I followed the money, because money leaves a trail, and lies do not. I pulled 4 years of my own bank statements. Every page. There was no deposit from the Lorraine Brandt Trust. Not 1 month. Not $1. $102,000 had supposedly entered my accounts, and there was no evidence of a single cent of it. Because it had never existed, he had written a receipt for money he had kept. And the signature. My signature. At the bottom, I want to tell you about my own signature, because I have signed my name as a professional witness on documents for 9 years, and I know my signature the way you know your own voice. On a recording, the forgery was a decent effort. It had the right loops. But it had been made slowly, drawn rather than written, the way a forgery always is. Because a real signature is a gesture, and a forged one is a drawing. There was a tremor in the downstroke of the N that my hand has never made. Worse for Dale, the agreement was dated the 3rd of a month, when, according to that same green notebook, I had driven my mother 2 hours to a specialist in the city, and we had not gotten home until after dark. I could not have sat in front of a notary that afternoon. I was on the interstate with my mother asleep, in the passenger seat. Every lie they told had a date on it. And I was the only person alive who had written down where we actually were on every one of those dates. For more than 1,500 days. In my own hand, Beatrice was right. The truest thing left in that house had been the thing in my hand. The whole time, here's where I have to be very careful with you, because this is where these stories usually cheat. And I promised you I would not. I did not do anything clever or sneaky. I did not use my job to pull strings. I want to be precise about that, because my whole life is built on doing this correctly. I have a colleague handle anything that touches my own family. And I never once examined a file connected to my mother's estate myself. That is not just ethics. It is the entire reason. What I did next could not be undone. A win that breaks the rules can be reversed. A win that follows every rule to the letter is permanent. I did not beat my brother by being lawless. I beat him by being the only person in the family who actually knew what the law already said. Before any of that, though, I went to see Mr. Adler, and what he told me turned a sad family story into something a court would have to take seriously. I climbed the stairs above the hardware store and sat across the desk from that careful old man, and I asked him a simple question. Did my mother have a will? And did he still have it? He looked at me a long moment, over his glasses. I do, he said. It is in the safe. It has been since the day she signed it. And I have to tell you, Miss Brandt, you are the second person from your family to ask me about it. My stomach went cold and still. The first, he said, had been Dale. Months before my mother died, Dale had called the office asking whether their mother had ever made a will, and if so, what it said, and whether it could be updated. Mr. Adler, being who he is, had told Dale only that he could not discuss a living client's affairs with anyone, not even her son. So Dale had hung up, knowing two things: that a will existed and that he could not get at it, which is precisely when, the dates would later show, he started building the other paper, the deed, the agreement, the whole forged architecture, designed to make a will not matter. Sit with that for a second, because it is the moment the villain stopped being careless and became deliberate. He did not forge a deed because he forgot there was a will. He forged it because he knew there was one and could not change it, and decided to bury it under enough official-looking paper that I would never go looking. He was counting on me being too tired and too grief-struck and too underestimated to walk up a flight of stairs and ask one old lawyer one plain question. He had spent 4 years watching me write in a notebook and concluded I was not a threat. It is the most expensive misjudgment he ever made. So I did 3 quiet, ordinary, completely legitimate things. In order. First, I took everything to an attorney, not Mr. Adler, who had the will, though I went to him too. I hired an elder law attorney named Miss Patricia Reyes, paid her retainer out of my own savings, and laid it all out on her conference table. The deed, the expired notary stamp, a went, the hospital records for the 14th of November, the care agreement, my 4 years of bank statements, showing no payments, and the green notebook. She read for a long time. Then she looked up and said, Miss Brandt, in 11 years, I have never had a client walk in with a contemporaneous record like this. Most people remember. You documented. That was the day I understood that the thing they called a diary was, in a court of law. Second, Miss Reyes filed a report on the notary. Marvin Teller, notarizing on an expired commission is not a private family matter. It is a matter for the Secretary of State, who licenses notaries, and it is a crime. We filed the complaint with the documentation. We did not have to prove our whole case to anyone. We simply reported a fact that was true on its face. And let the state do what the state does with notaries who stamp deeds after their commission has died. Third, and this is the one that actually moved the house. Miss Reyes filed 2 things at the courthouse: a formal challenge to the quitclaim deed, asking the court to declare it void for the reasons printed on its own face, and because Mr. Adler still had the original will in his safe, a petition to probate my mother's actual will, the real one, witnessed, valid, leaving the house to me, the one Dale had pretended did not exist, because he was counting on me having lost my copy. I had not lost my copy. I had filed it, like the kind of person who files things. Then she did one more thing, the smallest action in the whole story, and the one that brought my brother's world down around him. She recorded a single document at the county recorder's office. A notice. In the world I work in, we call it a lis pendens. It is 1 page. It does nothing dramatic. It simply tells the world, and more importantly tells every title company in the county, that the ownership of 14 Sycamore Street is in dispute and being litigated. It puts a cloud on the title, and a clouded title cannot be sold because no title company on earth will insure it, and no buyer's bank will lend on it. Dale had a buyer. Did I mention that? A nice young couple, pre-approved, offer accepted at $295,000. Closing scheduled. The house he stole with an expired stamp. He had already spent in his head. He was 3 weeks from cashing out a house that was never his, on a deed that was void, having forged a receipt to keep me from objecting, and then a title examiner pulled the file to do exactly what I do every day, and found, recorded right there on the public record, a 1-page notice that the title was in dispute, and the closing did not happen. I did not tell the buyers. I did not have to. The system I work inside of, the boring, patient, paper system that my brother spent 4 years calling my way of keeping busy, simply did what it is built to do. It read the documents, and it refused to let a lie close. Stay with me, because now we get to the only conversation Dale and I had about any of it. And it did not go the way he is used to conversations going. The call came in on a Saturday. My phone lighting up on the counter with his name. I let it go to voicemail the first time, on purpose, because I wanted to listen to it before I decided whether to pick up. The voicemail was loud and fast, and full of words like crazy and vindictive. And what is wrong with you? I listened to it twice calmly, the way I listen to a client who is hiding a number. And then I called him back. And here is the thing. The laughing room never understood about me. When I finally spoke, I did not raise my voice. I did not need to. I had the paper. He started in immediately, hot and accusing. The buyers walked. The sales dead. The titles frozen. You did this. You are trying to take the house out of pure spite, because you are bitter and alone. And, Dale, I said, and then I did the thing I do best. I told him facts, in order, in a flat voice, like reporting the weather. 1. The deed you recorded was notarized by Marvin Teller 8 months after his commission expired. That makes it void, not contestable. Void. You can read the expiration date yourself. It is printed under his name. 2. The deed is dated the 14th of November. Our mother was admitted to St. Vincent's that morning and spent the night there, confused and dehydrated. The hospital, has it in writing. She did not sign anything in front of any notary that day. She was in a bed, not knowing the year. 3. The care agreement says the trust paid me $102,000 over 51 months. My bank records show no payment from the trust. Ever. Not $1 of the $102,000 exists because you never sent it. You wrote a receipt for money you kept for, and the signature on that agreement is not mine. I sign my name 40 times a week as a professional witness. I know my own hand, and the day it claims I signed. I was driving Mom to the city for her neurology appointment, which is written with the time in the notebook you called my diary. 5. Wife. Mom's real will is in Mr. Adler's safe, witnessed, and valid. Dated 2 years before your deed, it leaves the house. To me, the court has it now. There was a long silence on the line. I could hear him breathing. And then, because Dale is Dale, he reached for the only tool he has ever had. You don't get paid, he said, his voice cracking, to love your own mother. You hear me? You don't get to make money off of. You are right, I said, and I let it sit for a second, because this was the only sentence in the whole call I had planned in advance. You don't get paid to love your own mother. You said it to a whole room. You believed it enough to laugh about it, which is exactly how I knew, the second I read it, that the agreement saying you'd paid me was something you wrote yourself. A man who really paid his sister $100,000 doesn't stand up at the repast and brag that she never made a dime. He had no answer for that. There is no answer for that. His own slogan, the cruel little line he had used for 4 years to make sure I never asked for anything, was the exact thread that, when I pulled it, unraveled the whole forgery. He had told the truth in public and lied on paper, and you cannot do both about the same thing and survive a person who reads paper for a living. This isn't something I am looking for input on. I told him, it is a complete sentence that won, and I recommend it to anyone. It closes an account faster than anything I know, and I hung up. Now let me tell you what landed, because I promised you this would not be a shrug. And a quiet woman's victory is still a victory, and it deserves to be counted out loud. The court voided the deed. There was no real fight to be had, because the defects were on the document itself. A deed acknowledged by an expired notary, signed by a grantor. The hospital records place in a bed elsewhere. Does not survive contact with a judge. The house at 14 Sycamore Street went into my mother's true estate, and her true will, witnessed and unbroken. Put it where she had said in front of a lawyer she wanted it, with the one who stayed. The Secretary of State acted on the notary complaint. Marvin Teller, it turned out, was a friend of Dale's from the contracting world, who had let his commission lapse and kept stamping things as a favor. He faced his own consequences for that. On the record. In writing, the kind of finding that follows a man, and once there was a written state finding that the notary on that deed had no authority. Every other document Dale had run through Marvin Teller came into question, which was, it would turn out, more documents than just ours. I learned about one of them by accident months later. And it is the part that took this from my private vindication to something larger. A woman about my age called me out of nowhere. Miss Reyes had given her my number, with my permission. Her name was Donna, and her elderly father had sold his duplex to a relative on a deed notarized by Marvin Teller. On a day her father had been in a memory care facility, 2 counties away. She had been told for a year that she was imagining things, that she was bitter, that she should let it go. Then the state finding about Teller's expired commission became public, and her own lawyer pulled the thread, and the duplex came back to her father's estate, where it belonged. She called to thank me, a stranger, because the cloud I put on my own family's title was the first stone that started the whole quiet avalanche. I want you to hear that. The thing they called me bitter for doing gave another tired daughter, 2 counties over, her father's house back. Quiet does not mean small. Quiet means it carries. The forged care agreement Miss Reyes turned over to the court as evidence of the attempted fraud. My bank statements, showing the absence of $102,000 that was sworn to have been paid, sat next to it. I did not have to make a speech about it. The 2 pages simply sat there together, the receipt and the empty account, and they said everything. The contrast did the work. That is the whole secret of the quiet ones. You do not have to call a man a liar if you can lay his lie down next to the truth and let the room look at both. And here is the number I keep, the one that is mine and not theirs. The going rate in our county for live in memory care, the around-the-clock kind I provided, is roughly $6,000 a month. $6,000 a month for 51 months is $306,000. That is what my 4 years and 3 months were worth on the open market. $306,000 of care, given for free, by a woman they toasted as a failure, who had never made a dime. The only paperwork that ever claimed I had been paid was a forgery, and it was for a third of what the work was worth. And even that third was a lie. I did the real math once, for myself alone, and then I closed the notebook on it. I did not do it for them. They were never going to be able to read it. Dale reacted the way men like Dale react. When the paper stops protecting them, he escalated. Exactly the way the loud ones do when quiet stops working. He called. He left voicemails, long ones, that went from furious to wheedling to something that almost sounded like an apology, but was really just a man asking me to make his consequences stop. He showed up at my door. Once, I did not open it. He sent messages through Janelle, who suddenly remembered she was my sister. He sent a letter, even 3 pages, no apology in it anywhere. Only the word family used 11 times, as if it were a key that still fit a lock I had changed. I answered. None of it, not out of cruelty. I had simply learned, finally, in my late 30s, the thing it took me far too long to learn, that silence, from a person who has the paper, is louder than any argument. The ledger said everything I needed to say, and it did not need my help saying it. When an aunt called to lecture me about forgiveness and being the bigger person, and what my poor mother would have wanted, I did not argue with her either. My poor mother had wanted, in writing, witnessed by a lawyer, for the house to go to the one who stayed. I told the aunt I wasn't looking for input on it, and I wished her a good night. And I hung up. It closes an account faster than anything I know. Janelle, I have not spoken to since. Dale, last I heard, had to answer for more than just our house. Because once a notary is found to have stamped on a dead commission, people start pulling the other deeds he touched. And not all of those families were as quiet as me. His contracting business took the kind of hit a small business does not always come back from. He could have just made the mortgage payments on his own life for years. He simply never had to, because there was always someone quieter than him holding everything up. That someone set the weight down, and the things he had balanced on top of me came down on their own. I did not get my family back. I want to be honest with you about that. because I think the cheap version of this story would end with a tearful reunion. And I do not respect you enough to lie to you. There was no reunion. I did not want one. What I got was smaller and truer and entirely mine. I got my time back. I went back to Meridian Title, full-time, and within a year, I was the senior examiner, the one the others bring the strange files to, the one who finds the thing on page 9 that everybody else missed. I bought a small house with my name on the deed, and nobody else's expectations inside it. I drove up to a lake one weekend and did not bring a single document, and I sat on a dock and could not, for a few hours, find anything in my hands to fix, and it was the strangest and best feeling I have had in years. There was one warm thing, and I will give it to you because the ending should not be all cold paper. Beatrice came back into it briefly. At the very end, when Miss Reyes needed someone who could speak to my mother's condition, and to the 4 years of care, I asked Beatrice if she would give a written statement. And she did, in her steady nurse's hand, dated and signed, and at the bottom, where the form did not ask for it, she had added one line of her own. I was in that house 3 nights a week for 3 years. I saw who stayed. We had coffee after it was all over. The two of us, at the same kind of kitchen table where she had once told me to keep writing. She read about the deed and the notary and the will. And she did not look surprised, only tired in the way good people get tired about bad ones. Then she reached over and tapped the green notebook on the table between us. Once, gently, exactly the way she had done years before, the truest thing in the house. She said, "Told you." And for the first time in a long time, I laughed, and I kept exactly one person. Emma, my niece, the kid who held a phone under a table and decided that the truth mattered more than her own father's comfort at 16. Which is braver than most adults. I know. She calls me now. Not when she needs something. Just to talk. Sometimes she drives over and we make dinner, and she tells me about school and the colleges she is looking at, and it goes both ways, the way it is supposed to. She is the one salvaged thread, and she is the only ledger I keep with family now. The kind where both columns actually fill in. I want to end where I started, with the 2 objects, because they are not what they were when I picked them up. The notebook first. For 4 years and 3 months, that green spiral notebook was the most invisible thing in the house. The thing my brother laughed at, the diary of a woman with nothing better to do. He was looking at the wrong object the whole time. It was never a record of how hard my life was. It was a record of where we actually were, on every single day, in my own unbroken hand. Made at the time. The one thing in that family that could not be redated, or re-signed, or retold to make the loud people look better. They had the laughter. I had the dates. And on the day it mattered, the dates were the only thing left standing. The thing they mocked me for keeping was the thing that kept me. Beatrice told me that at a kitchen table at midnight, and I did not understand it until a judge did, and the key. The house key on the faded blue ribbon, the one my mother tied with her own hands in the last good year, and pressed into my palm and closed my fingers. So you can always get in, she said. You are the one who is here. For years, it was just a spare key on a hook. I took it off that hook the day I walked out, almost without thinking, because some part of me knew it was already mine. I did not understand then that I was not taking a key. I was taking the only thing in that house that ever told the truth about what my mother wanted. Before the disease and the deed and the forgery tried to overwrite her, she gave the house to the one who was there. Twice. Once on a ribbon, with her hands. once in front of a lawyer, with her name. They tried to forge over the second one. They forgot all about the first. That key opens my mother's front door. It is my front door now, in writing, witnessed, on a deed nobody can touch. I do not live there. I rent it to a young family who fill it with the kind of noise it should have always had. But I kept the key. It still hangs on a blue ribbon, on a hook by my own front door. And every time I walk past it, I remember that the loudest people in that house spent 4 years deciding what I was worth, and they were the only ones in the room who never once got to write it down. So here is what I learned. And I am giving it to you, because somebody listening tonight needs it. Being the dependable one is not a debt the people you love get to collect from you forever. Your quiet competence is not a hobby, just because the loud people in your life have never bothered to learn what it is. And the day you finally sit down and read the record, slowly, 1 page at a time, with dry eyes and a steady hand, you find out very fast who valued you, and who only ever valued what they could take while you were too busy holding the door. That is my story. 4 years, 1 green notebook, 1 key on a ribbon, and 1 forged receipt that told the truth by accident. If you have ever been the quiet one, the one who kept everything afloat while louder people decided you didn't count, let this be your sign. You are allowed to set the weight down. You can stop holding the door and still be a good person. You might even find, the way I did, that the very thing they laughed at you for keeping is the thing that finally sets you free. If this story reached you tonight, share it with someone who has been carrying their family on their back in silence. Tell me your version in the comments. And subscribe, and stay quiet, and keep your records. And I will see you in the next one.